My what? Something I'm not doing here, I can't see.
Good afternoon, everybody. I won't gabble us all in because otherwise I'll do heart attacks again as ever. Welcome to this meeting of the Cost of Living Working Group of the 26th of January. My name is Councillor Paul Follows. I'm leader of the council and chairman of this group. Apologies for absence. We've just got Andrew Smith.
So just Andrew Smith.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest from any members?
We have not had any.
I think the only actual member of this group that's actually here in person and not on the Zoom is me, but Peter and Mark on the Zoom. Any issues with the minutes? Shaking head from Peter.
No.
And no from Mark. Good. Okay. In which case we move on to one of the main events of the afternoon, which is an update on the Waverley Food Bank. So can I thank Estelle, Kathy and David for being here, both in and so on. Apologies, Louise.
So, and Roslyn.
Anne Roslyn. That's because I haven't turned the page, is why. There we go, Anne Roslyn, thank you. Had the pleasure of working with Estelle at the Godalming Bank for a decent chunk of the pandemic, so really good to see you as well. And I'm going to hand over to Louise to introduce this section.
Thank you, Leader. And a really warm welcome to our representatives from food banks, community stores, community cupboards from across the borough. So we've got Estelle Spencer from Godalming Community Store, Kathy Burrows from Hale Community Cupboard, David Rice from Hazelmere Food Bank, and Roslyn from Cranley. Roslyn Doney, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate the time to come and share your experiences with us. You do incredibly fantastic work, and I know you're very busy, so thank you for coming today. If you wouldn't mind going around in order, talking to us about your experiences, what you've been facing, the need that you're meeting in your communities, and basically how you're finding it. And then I'm sure there'll be some questions afterwards, if that's all right. Can I start with you, Estelle?
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes. What to say? I mean, I think probably the same as everybody else, we're consistently busy. We thought we probably would be busier, and in the run up to Christmas, we certainly were wondering whether we were going to be able to cope with the number of people, but since Christmas, it's sort of quietened down. Having said that, over the last week, we've had loads more referrals again, but talking to Paul last week, I think maybe because there have been a lot of payments and things going out, that I think that probably has done exactly what you wanted it to. We're not seeing a lot of new people. We're sort of seeing broadly the same numbers of new people that we would usually see. Most of the referrals we get are re-referrals, and they probably are similar amounts of people. I think we've got around 70 odd households we're back up to again. We'd sort of dropped to about the low 50s after Christmas, but we're back up to nearly 70 again. And again, not a lot of, some new faces, but not a lot. The community continues to be incredibly generous. We're not short of donations at all. I think the media helps because it's constantly being publicised about people needing food banks, and that really does help us, we find. So we've got good supplies, we're getting good financial donations, and it's very busy. It's sometimes 20 or 30 hour week for me, but you know, it's fine, and we're coping fine. But just interested to see what the rest of this winter brings, really.
Hello, hi. So I'm from Hale Community Centre Community Fridge and Cupboard. So we are very different to a food bank. We don't have to take referrals. It's open to anybody, and we decided when we set this up in the latter half of 2020 that our focus would be on reducing food waste. But we know that that allows people who need to come and get additional food to come in without having referrals and without maybe the feelings that people have when they need to go to a food bank. So we work in conjunction with the food bank in Farnham and can pick people up a lot quicker. So at the moment, one of the challenges is that the food bank in Farnham has a 6-week waiting period. So what do people do when they go in crisis and they've been referred and they have to wait for 6 weeks? We are supplying them then with emergency parcels once a week during that period of time. Just to show the increase in need, in September to December 2021, we averaged 18 households a week visiting us. In the same period last year, at the end of last year, it was 52 households. We have 222 households registered with us, and that is about something like 600 individuals making up those households. At the moment, we're getting about 16 new registrations a month. And like Estelle said, the really busy period was before Christmas. It has tailed off a little bit now, but I'm expecting it to sort of increase again. The challenges that we face are actually reduced donations because our model takes donations from supermarkets. There's been a couple of changes, one of which is the change to labelling and taking away the best before dates. So of course, supermarkets are holding on to their produce a lot longer than they were before. So we've seen a marked decrease in the amount of fresh fruit and vegetables that we're getting. And also the reduced amount of stuff that goes in the freezer because they're marking down more in the supermarket, and therefore more stuff is actually being purchased by people, which is good, but it means that our stuff is reduced. And for the first time on Wednesday, we had to tell people that we'd run out, which was the very first time. So we've known it's been on the cards, but it's now happened. So the challenge, reduced donations at the same time as having an increased demand. So it's an increased number of visitors, a huge increase in the number of emergency parcels, mainly, as I say, because other sources of help are not able to come on stream as quickly as possibly we can. And also a huge increase in the number of requests for additional support. So to be signposted for help with bills, with finding out what is available from governments and councils, etc. We're also helping out Alton Fridge at the moment. They've had to move premises, and therefore they're not open as much. So we're sort of trying to help them out a bit.
Hi, I'm sorry for Kathy. I was just listening. I understand, Jane, did she get in contact with you last week? Because she wanted to give some additional funds to community stores, and I know she had reached out. Could you?
We've got the initial amount that came last month, but I haven't heard anything from her.
Okay, so just a couple of things. So there shouldn't need to be a 6-week wait for emergency food. So we have the Sainsbury's food vouchers. So we need to understand why that's not working. Is that through the food store, food bank itself, or through them applying to the Farnham element of the household support fund?
As far as I understand, it's through the food bank, the Farnham Food Bank. That's where the
okay,
the
because we can provide access to vouchers very easily.
Yeah.
So
and that's what I've said, is that we will use your funding to create emergency parcels to give to people for that period of time. Yeah.
And secondly, with support for household bills, again, to come to the household support fund. Now, again, I know they can go to the Farnham element, but if they're not getting a quick response, please let Jane know, and because we need to do something about that, because the whole point is it's not taking 6 weeks. But absolutely, can you send Jane an email if you need some further funds, because we can certainly top up community stores. That's not a problem. We've got plenty there.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks. We got David on the Zoom from Hazelmere.
Hello. Hazelmere got a lot busier before Christmas, as everybody else has said. We had a slight lull after Christmas, but it's continued to be very busy in our terms since then. I mean, we are a modest food bank. We're in an area of sort of low demand and high donation levels, which is good for the people who need to use us. We're getting over 30 households a week now. We had 40 odd during the pandemic, and it's usually around 20 to 25 mark, but it has gone up. And these are new people. We've got people with long-term problems that we've known for a long time, but we are getting new people now, and people at work. I think that's about all about the present situation, except that we are, like the rest, I guess, agents for Surrey for the hardship fund, and we are helping people with their fuel bills and provision of special equipment for children with impairments, occasionally repairs to a car that has become vital to a family because they've got people to transport here, there and everywhere. But that's, we've also started doing breakfasts, which has helped another group of people who come in first thing in the morning to both to get breakfast and also to meet other people, which is an important part of what we do.
Thank you very much, David. And last but never least, Rosalind Cranley.
Hi. Well, we're somewhere in between, I think, in terms of our catchment and what we provide. We run a drop-in cafe at the same time. So quite a lot of the people who we've known for years come and go with their needs for food, but they often come back for a cup of tea to tell us how they're getting on. We, like everyone else, were high during the lead up to Christmas, dropped right down. We did one on the day before New Year's Eve, which I think people didn't expect us to, so they didn't come very much. But then we're back up to 30, and Cranley is a fairly, well, it's a growing place, but it is smaller than some of the others that are speaking here today. We are also seeing a lot of new people. We've been very affected by the Ukrainian refugee situation because Cranley became a very big hub for teaching English. So we gained a lot of Ukrainians, but that's dropping off now as more of them are either going back or getting jobs or getting their benefits sorted out. So we don't see them as frequently, but we are getting some people who are coming. That's quite a chronic situation for a number of people, but we're also getting a number of new people referred from places I didn't even know existed. I didn't realize there were quite so many people who could refer people to a food bank, to be perfectly honest. The surgery are now referring more, which we're really pleased about, and obviously the CAB. And we work quite closely with the CAB. And we have a very unique way of doing our vouchers. If someone turns up in need, we will give them food. They don't need a referral. We will never turn anyone away. And we will give them a food parcel. We often have quite a lot of fresh because we pick up from Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's, and we also buy fresh for people who we know are coming. So we're giving them not just ambient, but fresh food, because we have a lot of donations, both of food and of money. And I've lost my train of thought. I go off on tangents. I'm terrible when I start talking about it. Where was I? Let me just think. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the new people who are coming. We're getting quite a lot of people on their own, quite a few from the probation service at the moment, which, I mean, 3 new people from probation service in 1 week. I don't know if that's going to be a trend. I don't know, but and a lot of single men, quite different. But yes, the voucher system that we use, they can turn up without a voucher. Then when they come, we say to them that they need to get a referral because we want to make sure that they are under another organisation other than ourselves. So we ask them preferably to go to the CAB or someone that they know. So if they're under social services or under the probation service or whatever, just to make sure that they are aware of any benefits they might not be getting, so that it's not just us giving them food. And then once they've got that referral, they are entitled to email us 3 more times without another referral. So they can turn up, they need a referral, then they can have 3 more just by texting us or emailing the food bank directly and coming. And then we will give them a food parcel 3 more times. So basically it's 4 from 1 voucher. And that seems to work quite well. They completely understand why we're doing it, because we say we look at every person holistically, that we want them to have every help, not just food. And that's one of the great things about the cafe. We get to talk to people, we get to find out a little bit more about them, signpost them to other things, chat to them about how things are going, keep an eye on them. And we find that actually as much benefit as the food in some ways. And so many people have commented that they found that really helpful. So I was actually sitting here before coming on this, making up the list. It's a very eclectic mix again for tomorrow morning. We do it once a week on a Friday morning. And we also, it's at the Baptist Church where I'm a leader there, and we've set up a winter warmer soup lunch on a Monday as well. And we're trying to encourage some of our clients from a Friday to come and have soup lunch with us on a Monday as well. So it's kind of extending a little bit. I think that's probably me.
Thank you very much. I think it's pretty clear that in classic Waverley style, everybody's doing it in their own slightly different way in each part of the borough, as according to the need. And it's going to just go back to Louise and probably Katie just to ask a little bit of an update about what the borough are doing in terms of supports and signposting, if that's all right, before I go to questions.
So I know Jane made contact actually with Sabah Hussain from Surrey County Council, us being able to put some further funding towards the food banks, because we knew that the food banks were getting used a lot at the moment. They actually think they want to do that on a Surrey-wide. But what I would say is, and I'll get Jane to touch base with you all this week, is we are able, any new applicant could have up to £750 of Sainsbury's vouchers in today's things, which will help them through this difficult time. So if people are coming back repeatedly to food banks, we're able to support in another way. So just because they've been to a food bank would not mean that they wouldn't get access to the Household Support Fund. The Household Support Fund now, Hazelmere, Godalming and Cranley, is all being operated by us here at Waverley Borough Council. It is done slightly differently in Farnham, because they are wanting to say try this much more holistic approach around looking at the applicant and then what other organisations that they've got who can support. That might slow things down, and we don't want that to happen. So if there are reports of things being slowed down, then we would like to know that immediately. I'll just give you a case. We had yesterday, through our housing options team, they went out to visit one of our tenants. We found that he had no money on his top-up card, no food, and children at home. So the housing officer topped up his prepayment electricity card, and they came here to the council this morning. We were able to supply £500 of Sainsbury's food vouchers so he can go shopping for his family and buy his own food and be empowered, so they're not always reliant on that. So I would urge, we have actually got plenty of funds, and we are already, I spoke to Jane earlier, we're going to actually go out to one of them was on our list around promote more wildly through like the Hale and the Godalming Community Store. We're looking at going out to our towns and parishes. We're looking at going out to Cameo Cafe, to the local group, so that actually there's a lot of awareness, because we weren't restricted this time on how we disseminate the funds. We've been known to be really flexible, so there is plenty in the pot to support. I really wouldn't want people going without, but I'll get Jane to do a real blast, and we're going to try and do some social media as well. So please, if you're getting repeat people who are approaching food banks, we can help with the Household Support Fund as well. And it also can help with potentially cookers, fridges, anything which is around helping with food, so we can buy some white goods, and we will look at people on individual cases. So I'll do a bit more, but Kathy, you're almost probably more linked in with Farnham. If there's issues, can you email James? Because we can then pick those up, because we need it to be the same in Farnham for people to access.
Who's leading on that in Farnham? Is it
It's Stacey,
Yeah.
but they have a group and I think they only meet once a week. But if it is a barrier to people getting food, please, can we just know? Because we can, you know, we can work with Stacey, and if necessary, we'll say to Stacey, emergency ones, send them our way. So that there really isn't a problem, and there is plenty of funds to get us through the next couple of months.
Because if we're looking at 6-week backlogs for people specifically in Farnham, that is a little
Yeah,
concerning.
yeah. Whereas, you know, we've most probably got about 80,000 still, which we've got till last week of March to spend. So there's plenty of money to support, and we can support you as organisations as well. Slightly tricky with the food banks when we spoke to Saba, but we'll follow that back up with Saba ourselves as well.
Yeah, I'm sure if there is a way to do it, I'm sure you will
Yeah,
find it.
absolutely. Just as and again, David,
Yeah.
please send people our way if they keep coming. And Rosalind, if you're one of the associated food banks, but people are coming back time and time, please just refer them on to ourselves. I'll get Jane. Jane does, I know, keep in contact with everybody, but I'll get her to send an email out to just say, please come back to us and we can help and support.
So I'd like to open it up now to questions from anybody in the room to the reps from the food bank, but equally from our food bank reps, if you've got any questions for Waverley that you would like us to have a look at. I actually have got a hand up from Lynn from COW though first on the Zoom.
Hi, thank you. Just to go back to Katie, actually, on the white goods and top-up prepayments, are we able to access that as well? I may be behind my staff here, they may already be doing it, but is that a possibility? We're getting an awful lot of people in debt with prepayments.
Yeah, absolutely. And your staff are referring. Cranley are actually very, very good. But yeah, please just make sure they come through. I'll get Jane to resend you the link to the Household Support Fund. But again, the Farnham one, you have to go through Farnham. But if they have a backlog and it looks like somebody is really struggling, please come to us directly. We can work with Farnham. It's not a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room or on the Zoom? Sorry, Estelle.
I've just got one regarding the Household Support Fund. So I know we've got people who have accessed that before Christmas, but they're still coming to us. Presumably they can only have it one time.
If they really are still struggling, please get them to call us and come back to us. If you really know they're in hardship, please don't let them just wait. There are funds. We initially had, because we were so busy the first 2 tranches and so restrictive on the second tranche, we had initially an allocation of 750, but we've always said, please come back. We can look at them people individually, and they say there's plenty in the pot, and we would do that. And then we do also then try and just link into Citizens Advice as well, just to make sure that they access that service.
Quick question from me. I mean, poor Estelle is stuck with me in my town council hat as well, but can I just double check that is there a good relationship between the towns and parishes and your organisations and the other parts of Waverley? Or if there isn't, can you flag it? Because I'm not entirely sure what the relationship is between the town council and these organisations elsewhere.
We have a good relationship. Our problem is always funding, because we're an independent charity and we don't receive funding. You know, we don't receive a sort of a block of funding. We have to go to Community Foundation. We were very grateful to receive a tranche of money from the Household Support Fund because we were out of funding. And that's always the issue. We have to, because the fridge is part of what we do, we have to employ someone to coordinate it, and that obviously costs. Yeah, and if you think about, you know, our model is you have to go and collect food from the supermarkets. It then has to be labelled and stored correctly. Then somebody has to, you know, man a session to actually give it all out. So we have about 40 volunteers that run the fridge, but they all have to be coordinated. So it's actually quite a big enterprise.
I did a couple of days at the Godalming fridge, and it's yeah, it's a lot more effort than anybody assumes when you walk in there straight away. Same with the food banks. Dave, Rosalind, any issues or things that you just want to flag in regards to working with Hazelmere and Cranley respectively?
Can I just ask about the vouchers?
Please do.
Is it only for Sainsbury's? Because we don't have a Sainsbury's in Hazelmere.
Well, that was the thing. So it was being operated by the Godalming Hazelmere Town Council. So they were buying those vouchers. So we've taken that over. Yes. So it will not be Sainsbury's for Hazelmere. But because we buy them in bulk, you can't use those vouchers for alcohol, cigarettes, or lottery tickets. So they you know, so they are going to what we need it to go. And the other reason we do the Sainsbury's vouchers is because some people are needing clothes, for warm clothes for children and things. So if that is a choice that they need to make their money go round, then they can use the Sainsbury's vouchers to buy clothes as well. But David, yeah, we should be at this point ordering, I think it's Tesco's, isn't it? It's the main one. We're looking at Tesco's vouchers.
Tesco's our main supermarket.
Yeah. So that's the one we're looking at, because if we can buy them a bulk at source, then they come with that. They can't be used for alcohol, cigarettes, or lottery tickets.
One of our issues comes up is that there's nowhere in Hazelmere to buy low-cost schoolwear. There are uniforms mostly for the private schools, but they just sort of straightforward stuff like white shirts and blouses, grey skirts and shorts. There's nowhere selling them cheaply. Tesco don't do it here. And it is a problem of how to get these things together. The schools themselves run exchanges for second-hand clothes, but there's nowhere to buy anything new at a reasonable cost.
I mean, again, that's fine. The applicant just needs to say what they need the funding for. We have to be slightly careful, because the funding is prescriptive in that it is for predominantly food and fuel poverty. But what we do is look at, you know, the application. So one of the ones we had is they need food and fuel, and the 14-year-old was sleeping on the sofa with no bedding. Well, actually, that's not going to do that 14-year-old any favours with going to school, doing revision. So we look at it completely holistically. So what we ask people to do is say, what do you need? And then we will look at it to say how we can juggle the funding to make it fit. We did an awful lot on school uniforms last year. Predominantly, we're able to do it through the Sainsbury's food vouchers for those people who can access a Sainsbury's that sell clothes, because they do sell white shirts and all of that. But if it is different, we will give the funding directly to the person to go to that shop they need to buy that uniform. So we wouldn't necessarily give a voucher. The whole point is to make it as easy for the person as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Oh, sorry, Lynn. Is that
yes, please. Just a thought, really. If the vouchers are used for the food, but Katie, they're fairly flexible with yourselves, is there a way we could do stuff purchase? Can they purchase online? For example, if they go online, Tesco's, they may be able to get clothing or something like that. And if that was the case, is it worth us thinking maybe a volunteer from Citizens Advice could go to a local food bank or local venue with a laptop to do that with clients if they haven't got access?
No, we can make it easier. What we've decided to do is be very trusting to the people who are applying for the funding. What we ask them to do, if they say live in Hazelmere and we weren't able to get the amount of Tesco's food vouchers that we need, we would pay directly into their bank account. What we ask them to do, and people do it, they've been brilliant, is could you then please send us a screenshot of your either your receipt or your bank statement? So, you know, we can't pay people's fuel bills directly. It will be administratively a nightmare. We did look into it. So what we do is somebody needs £328 for their utility arrears. We will pay that directly into their bank account, and then they will send a screenshot to us of how that's been paid into their to their utility company. If they choose not to do it, then we can't manage everything. But what we're finding is actually they're very honest, and people are doing that the same with buying their own washing machine, their own cooker. We will transfer the money, they'll buy it, and they do show us the receipt that they bought it with. And we've tried to be a bit empowering, so it's not feeling like people are having to, we don't want to make it difficult for people who really need funds. Does that help? So there's no problem to anything, basically. We'll sort it.
Okay, any other questions? No, not seeing any, in which case I will say thank you as always for everything that you're doing. I think if the rest of Waverley is anything like Godalming, there was clearly a considerable unmet need for food banks and community fridges that existed far before the pandemic, that unfortunately we're now still seeing in lots of different ways. And community fridges obviously provide a very different type of benefit as well in terms of reducing waste, and that's fantastic too in a different way. So if there's anything we can do from Waverley perspective, and certainly I imagine the town councils will continue to offer any support that they can as well. And certainly if there's anything we could do, please just give us a shout. And certainly Estelle, you know where to find me. Anyway, on that note, I shall move on then to item 5. Now, you're obviously welcome to stay with us. I'm not going to hold anybody here against their will or even try. I've tried that with councillors and it doesn't work. In which case I shall move on to item 5, which is an update on the actions log. Louise, I think that was with you having it transferred from the now departed Mark Mills.
So
he's left the council, he's not, I should probably clarify.
He's absolutely fine. He's gone to another council. He's right. Yes, somewhere in Oxford. Leader, do you want to go through the log? And
no, I don't want to go through the log. I just want to see if there's any particular query that you want to flag. I've got 1 or 2 which I'll deal with in a moment.
No, I don't have any. It's there as updated.
Okay, so the only thing I just wanted to add was there is a letter that is with me to go to the Treasury, and I will make sure that is signed off so it can be sent. The only other one I was going to actually add an item, an action, which was there is a set of cost of living indicators for Waverley that's been compiled under item 6 for this meeting. Could I request that be sent to all of the town and parish clerks throughout Waverley so they can forward it on to all of the councillors of every level in Waverley? Because a lot of that is quite interesting information that might generate other queries. Certainly just as an education piece as well, I think would be quite useful for others to have a look at. And I'm also doing this in every place I'm doing it. Could you also include the 2 MPs that cover Waverley in that list? So they have got no deniability that they have seen this information at least once from somewhere. Okay, any other comments, queries, questions on actions? Any other actions people would like to get added at this stage? So Louise.
Sorry, Leader, just recognising that Mark had prepared that sort of small note on the bus fares. I just wonder whether anybody's got any anecdotal evidence that it's working. I don't know whether any of the representatives from the food banks or organisations that people are using that and it is helping. I haven't heard.
We have had people who have appreciated it, because to get down to Farnham town from where we are in Upper Hale for a family could cost about £10. It was sort of like £5 odd. So that does make a difference to people using it.
Just on the other side of that though, as quite a few bus routes are being consulted for cancelling by Surrey County Council, that cap is all well and good, but if there aren't any actual buses to use them on, it's kind of irrelevant. Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I haven't had any feedback on the uptake on it. I have been advertising it myself within the Cranley community. The other thing is that it does involve some hopper journeys as well, which I'm not sure how much that is getting out to people. So I think some of the more mature members of our community might be quite interested in that. So I don't know whether there's anything that we can do to try and push that, or get something from Hopper, to be honest, to push it through. So I only saw that a couple of days ago, to be honest. So
yes, we can take that as an action to have a chat with them. I think it has been overshadowed by the reductions in buses. I mean, certainly in my ward in Oxford Ridge and Aarons Hill, the main issue is not being able to afford the bus. It's the bus, all the routes down from Oxford to the town centre being cut or reduced to the point of effectively being cut. So there's
I'll just come back to that. And not just them being cut, but being cancelled at the last minute. We're still getting quite a few buses cancelled, which is quite difficult for people if it's the school bus, as in the time for children to get to school. And then what's happening is that their parents are having to take them to school themselves, make alternative arrangements literally at the last minute. And I have been in contact with Compass, and they're very, very, sorry, and they're not happy at all about cancelling services, but we're still suffering from a lack of staff sickness, so there's still that ongoing situation happening with the buses as well.
okay. Anything else you want to add, Louise, at this point? No. Okay, last chance for anybody to raise any additional new actions or query the existing ones. Going once, going twice. Okay, right, in which case then item 6 is the community data metrics that I was just referring to a moment ago, which is again with Louise to introduce.
Yes, sorry, it's lots of things from me, sorry. You'll know that you've had quite a lot of metrics since September when you had your first meeting. Some are better than others, and some are more valuable than others in terms of timeliness. Quite a few of the indicators are sort of, for example, 3 months in arrears, which aren't always very helpful. At the end of the agenda, there is a discussion about the output from this working group, what you want to see, whether it's an interim or a final report. And I would suggest maybe a discussion about which indicators you find useful and may want to consider having as an executive on a monthly or a quarterly basis going forward, so that you can sort of keep a monitoring eye on some of them. Some of the indicators are really good at representing or indicating need. And I think the metrics from food banks and CAW and homelessness applications are those sort of things. But also equally within the context that you're working in, it's useful to see those indicators where the council is being affected in delivering services by loss of income, for example. So I think that some of those are quite important too in the context in which we're working. Just having a look at some of the indicators that are in the pack that you've got. Interesting, for example, housing rent arrears. One would think that that was a really good indicator, but the team are so good at keeping it within that 1%, and anecdotal evidence from other local authorities is that they're not as good. And I know the team works so hard with tenants to sort of work with them almost as social workers to sort of get them to pay their rent. That it's interesting that one is fairly steady, and you'd expect it to be going possibly above 1%, but once it's done so in the last sort of couple of years. So interesting, that one. A couple of others are sort of quite well in arrears. Some of the unemployed, the people in receipt of universal credit and that sort of thing. Obviously, some of the indicators are directly provided by us, and some of them aren't. So you might want to think about that in terms of going forward. Some really useful information from Lynn. Thank you very much, from the Citizens Advice on their need at the moment. So that's at the back of that paper. But then I put a few indications, things that you might want to think about in terms of metrics going forward that you might want to see on a regular basis. And one of those might include something like free school meals and whether those have gone up in Waverley. So I pass it across to you really just to have a...
That was actually the specific one I was going to mention, free school meals as an indicator. I mean, there's a few in here as well, which, I mean, they say a thing, but of course then raise a further question. So for example, unemployment rate is a useful metric, but actually it's how many jobs people have got and what they're paying, which is, I mean, so average pay, for example, within Waverley would be something I would be keen to know, and how many people hold more than one job. I know several people who, for example, are cleaners, or they work in effectively gig economy jobs, and so the employment rate is quite good, but if neither of those are meeting something close to a living wage in Surrey, you know, that's obviously a different issue. When we ask town and parishes councillors about this, could we also just put a note on it saying, are there any of these metrics that they find they would like to keep seeing, any that they can suggest as well? And I forgot to add to that action also to include the rest of Waverley Borough Council's members who might be excluded from that list. But no, otherwise, I think they're quite a good set of metrics, and particularly ones from CAW there, which are ones that you don't normally see, if not in this sort of group, about number of inquiries. Any individuals want to raise anything else about these metrics, or add any, make any suggestions for additions? Annalisa?
I just thought it was an interesting point that Louise picked up about the rent arrears, and what I'd like to say is that that's actually a really positive story for us, that actually your primary debt should be your rent. You need to pay your rent to keep your home over your head, and then we're adding that level of support for people who've got financial hardship in other ways. So the message is always pay your rent first before anything else, and we can help with other things.
Because it wouldn't take an ungenerous person to find a way to make that sound negative, I think, is the other problem with that, I guess, because we're not haranguing people to the point that they're paying their rent on time, and that's why they are. It's that actually you're working with them to make sure that that is something that they prioritize. Yeah. Okay. Kathy, did you want to jump in there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I don't know the background of the metrics, but if they're not just Waverley things, are you approaching people like Vivid that provide the social housing? So like 50% of the houses in our local estate are run by Vivid. So they will have their own rent arrears and information.
Actually, I might go back to Annalisa then. Do we do any other benchmarking or have any other metrics from other social providers within Waverley for housing?
No, it's something we can ask for, but with an organisation like Vivid, because they're so large and they're national, it's quite difficult to get a true comparison because they're looking at their national figures. When we come out with the tenant satisfaction measures next year, that would be quite interesting for us to be able to do that. But I'm sure we can provide the same advice and support to our local housing associations that we provide to our housing officers.
Could we just take an action then to ask some of these organisations in the first instance if they would provide any data, if they have any meaningful data that we can use, just so we have ticked that box and seen what they have got. They might just tell us no, and they might give us something completely useless, but let's ask. Lynn?
Just a quick one. In terms of the information we can provide, there's a map on that, one of the sheets there that gives you the local areas. If town councils want to use that as an interactive, I can see how we can do that, so you can look at it locally. If that's useful. If it's not useful, I won't bother. But there is a way of doing that, and it might actually be useful to send to the MPs, because then they can see their own areas and things like that as well. So I can liaise with Louise if that's all right.
I think that'd be a really good idea. If you need to demo it on anybody, I'll volunteer Godalming as always for that.
Yeah.
And we can have a look. Certainly the MP should have it, because they've got actual researchers and teams in their offices that can make use of this information. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Lynn. Katie.
Yeah, I just want to comment that we are finding that the housing associations, the tenants in those are actually most probably getting disproportionately impacted because they don't get the benefit of being a tenant within our own social housing. So what we have done is sort of gone through to promote the household support funds and for people to coming back. So I've just noticed, it's great. We've been able to give it a credit to all our own tenants with our own social housing, but we can't give that credit to those ones in housing associations. So I really wouldn't want people to miss out. So again, if people are in housing associations and you do know, come to the household support fund, because we do know there is that sort of slight discrepancy, even though I think they go via our housing register to get that housing. So we are trying to link in quite closely with them.
Thank you very much, Casey. Joan?
Mine's just a very quick point about the sources of some of this data. I've got a bit confused on pages 11 and 12. Is this internal Waverley data, having moved on from the citizens' advice pages? So I think it could be useful to clarify that before we circulate it more widely.
The last 3 pages are all citizens' advice. So the cost of living dashboard, the one with the map on,
yeah,
and the all cost of living issues last 12 months.
So they're all citizens' advice. Yeah. I think it would help just to make the sources clear on every page.
Yeah. Thank you. I will.
Thank you for that, Joan. Okay, any other questions, comments on the metrics? Any other suggestions of additions or removals or clarifications? Okay, that should all be fine. Obviously, we've got an action then to distribute out that, pending some minor alterations to it, and we'll see if anybody else comes back. But Louise, I think taking your suggestion that once we've done that exercise with the town and parishes, if we can lock in a set of metrics that we report on, and we'll define a periodicity when we see what that list is. Okay, then moving on to item 7, the Surrey Community Action Cost of Living Report. Louise, my apologies. That's with you as well. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, that got past. So this was raised back in September, I think, by Andrew Smith, that the Surrey Community Action were doing a survey of the voluntary sector and charitable sector, and the survey has now been published and is in front of you. So generally, it actually paints a reasonable picture, I would suggest. Reasonably optimistic, they say in the report. But that there are a significant minority facing massive challenges, and there are others who are likely to struggle in the future. And the small community groups remain fairly well placed to meet immediate local needs and are confident that they will have to continue to meet that need. Whereas larger organisations who have to meet salaries, premises costs, that sort of thing, are facing greater challenges, especially around salaries and recruitment. Most of the organisations in the survey expect to weather the storm. A large proportion may have to reduce their services, however, and I was talking to a colleague at Elmbridge Borough Council who was saying that some of their organisations are significantly affected in terms of how much debt advice they've been able to give. They're just having to reduce their services because of funding. Many charities are looking to increase their fundraising efforts, of course, and to renegotiate their existing grants. And most organisations expect the situation to deteriorate even further in the next 12 to 18 months. But most expect to survive, which is the good news, even if they are smaller at the end than when they started. The advice and suggestions from the survey for funders and commissioners and for local government, obviously, which Waverley is, they would suggest that existing funding work consider an automatic cost of living increase across all grants and contracts. And where uplifts cannot be offered, perhaps redefine outputs and outcomes to allow reduced service delivery to the existing budget, and consider in-kind support, which I know we've done in the past, such as offering office space and access to facilities. And they put a plea to local government to please work with them to locally understand their issues, which I know we do, which is this working group is trying to do that at the moment. So more a positive than negative survey outcome, I would suggest.
Just slightly sort of related to this, but a tangent. I was reading that the Levelling Up funding money was running a little short because of it hitting the bricks of inflation and other rising costs. And I've had previously noted, and Liz might be able to comment on this more, that the SIL board was running up with similar issues where a community had somebody had put in a bid for something 3 months ago, and they'd been granted that money or were likely to be, but that was no longer going to be sufficient because of various inflationary pressures. Is that what you're seeing, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about the levelling up money, that's been awarded, not now covering the cost of the projects that it's gone towards. And with the SIL as well, it's very time constrained as well. They do have to spend it quickly. So if costs have escalated, there's not much time for people to remedy that. And I think, we are going to see on the SIL board people coming back again to either for extra money, or they might even not be able to carry the projects through because they just simply haven't got the money for it. So we'll see. We've had a couple of requests for extensions at the moment, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, to be honest, it's only been probably in this last month that people are really starting to feel the hit of the energy bills. And also, from March, then it changes for businesses and how much that they're getting on there and how much help they're getting with their energy bills. So I think, we're going to see a bit more coming through, but yes, I can monitor that and report back on that if you like.
I was actually going to ask in this case, Louise, could you take an action for Marissa? Would it be? Yeah, Marissa, just to give us an update on for the next one of these, if we've got any SIL projects for community projects that are likely to now need to come back or will collapse as a result of funding pressures. And probably a sub question for Katie. Are we seeing any Thriving Communities Fund issues as a result of inflationary pressures, or is that being managed at the moment?
No, we're not. We did have Hazelway mention that their utility bill has really gone up drastically. I think it had gone up almost like 20,000 in a quarter or some really ridiculous. So we've just said, can people feed back to us? But that is the only one that we've had reported of this sort of really high energy bill for community. But I imagine certainly Rowley's is independent, their heating bill will go up, I imagine. And who else have we got? Oh, the Clock House and things. So, yeah.
Actually, I was made aware of a revised pricing model for the Clock House today, which I don't know whether you're aware of. And
they don't
maybe
share anything with us.
Well, that may be relevant to some of this discussion, and I'll share that joy with you later.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
I look forward to it.
I know you love talking about the Clock House just as much as me. Okay, in which case, any other comments or questions on item 7 before I move on to item 8? Seeing none, no. Okay, in which case, update on the business and economy side. I think we've got Catherine on the Zoom, if you'd like to introduce this one, Catherine.
Hi, thank you. I did send round a last minute update on feedback and insights that we've received from the business community. So as you'd expect, we're hearing that costs, staff pressures and costs, recruitment, and also consumer spending being the big areas. So we sent out a online survey yesterday, shared through the Chambers of Commerce and our partners. And we've had some initial insights from a good number of businesses of different sizes, not massive businesses, but primarily businesses based on business premises, to see what their big issues are and also how we can support them. So the key findings on that, Ian said he would share his screen if he's able to, because I'm not able to from my laptop. But really costs are, so you can see here, this is from a small independent in Hazelmere. The key areas that are issues for them, spending was good in December, but still lower than pre-pandemic stages. On the marketing side, the support side of businesses, obviously business costs are being reduced, so they can't spend on ancillary services. And they did mention the voluntary sector and having fewer volunteers. I don't know if that's what other people have found. Staff pressures, as Waverley itself is aware as well. Ian, on the next slide, there's just the key words, the key insights that came out. Sorry, it's a little bit small, but yeah, rent increases. People are worried about business rate revaluations that are happening for the next business rate bills, and we've had real concerns, especially from the industrial sector, business parks on that, thinking the smaller bills are going to increase massively. Consumer confidence, recession news quite a lot. Is that going to put people off? Cost of living, recruitment. So those are the challenges, and their priorities would be looking for new customers, retaining staff, looking at their business model. So you can see 35% of the businesses that responded have said costs are the most important priority for this coming year. And they're trying to reduce their costs, but energy costs are increasing at a rate that they can't match. And then just finally, there was a couple of small graphics on. So the larger section, the businesses that responded are those that are based in business premises. They're not people working from home, and they're up to sort of 50 employees, many small micro businesses as well, as is the majority in Waverley. So you can see on the second diagram, business will struggle. That's the red colour. They are concerned about, and they are, lacking in confidence in that respect. And then finally, in terms of recruiting staff, green colour is hard to recruit new staff, so retention being important. And some of the detailed feedback has been, we've got to keep it fun, we've got to support staff, we've got to provide bonuses, and cost of living support, well-being very important. So, similar issues to councils themselves. I don't know if anyone had any other questions. Those are all of the slides and the information. I've got more detail if people would like.
So Catherine, I mean, there's ever anecdotal evidence, but almost every business I'm speaking to, certainly in Godalming and some of the wider Waverley, almost irrelevant of the sector that they're in, is facing supply side cost increases, which is now making them consider putting prices up in some regard. If they haven't already, they're thinking of doing it now or thinking of doing it again.
Yes.
I'm also seeing, for example, sort of commercial wings of charities. So the one that springs to mind is Changing Perceptions, that used to be the Meaths kind of charitable arm in the high street. That is closed because its energy bills are completely unsustainable. So they've had to shut up shop totally. So I think Liz was saying things are now starting to bite. So this might be the sort of trailing edge of what's to come.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. Yeah, so from April, the support and the subsidy won't be there. There'll be, I think it was Hazelmere Bookshop and Ian, who was on this at this meeting previously. They get 2p subsidy compared to 50%. So their costs will go up by about £8,000 a year. But when we've asked what support businesses would like from the council, they've said training and skills and marketing and social media support. Primarily, access to finance was only 11%, so they're not expecting the council to provide financial support, which is helpful because we're not able to. So those are things that we can do something about.
And actually, and I won't go into it now because it's more a matter for about 100 days time, but skills is something that I think a few of us in this room, members, want to look at and expand greatly how we provide those kind of skills. So that one's certainly heard. Any comments or questions for Catherine or on the economics and business side at the moment? Okay, none at the moment, but Catherine, I'm quite keen that we keep this on there because I think I certainly feel like this is the leading edge of some bad times to come, unfortunately. So if we can keep this on there for a little while, just so we can touch base on this every time we have one of these.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you'll see one of the quotes. Potentially, we're going to be squeezed from all sides with no visible way out. So, yeah.
I don't know about anybody on the room as well, but I'm seeing more shortages of things as well that you just wouldn't normally see shortages of. And that just keeps popping up. I won't go into the reasons why. I'm sure some of us will guess why that might be, but there does seem to be at the moment a growing number of things that are harder to get hold of than it used to be. Okay, thank you, Catherine, as always, for that. I'm going to move on then to item 9. So welcome to John and to Patrick. Patrick, I just want to double check, you're here in your union hat, is that right? I haven't presumed that incorrectly. Good, excellent. John, Patrick, would you like to introduce the report regarding Waverley staff?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So the first bit just really sets out some key indicators across the economy as a whole, which obviously Waverley staff are subject to. And no surprises there. You'd be very familiar with all the other metrics that prices have continued to rise, and particularly energy and fuel have been significant costs over the now sustained period really since February 2021. The second section looks at sort of statistical information where we've just broken down a number of things. So I'll just briefly explain. So we've broken down employees at different salary levels. So you can see how the makeup is set for the staff there across. We've also looked at what the average salary is and the median salary across Waverley Borough Council. As a comparison, I was just having a look. South East median figure salary is around 35. So we're a little bit lower than that on average, but that's looking across all sectors. Staff turnover is something that we regularly monitor to see if there's any particular issues there. We are revamping the kind of levers survey information to try and get some more specific guidance on that now to see what the particular issues are. Just looking at the latest figures on that, pay is the main issue that people have been quoting on that, but we don't know the specific reason behind that. That's something that we're going to look to sort of delve into a bit further in the future. Generally, though, staff turnover stayed pretty steady over the last sort of 12 months, and there hasn't been a sort of significant increase in that, but it's something we're keeping a very close eye on. Also looking at sickness trends to see there's been an increase in days lost for mental health over the last sort of 12 months. We just have to be a little bit careful there to make sure it's not necessarily individual cases. There have been a couple of longer term cases, not necessarily linked to any sort of cost of living, but that's obviously an impact potentially as well. Little note on the pay negotiations timetable. I think people will have seen the pay proposal has gone out now, and Patrick and the union have sent out an email on that, and we've set up a meeting next week to get feedback from staff generally on that on any points. There was some work that was done previously around mileage and cost of travel on that. And if it's okay, I might ask Patrick to comment on that, because I think he had some input into that report.
Yeah, thank you, John. So that was a report that Sally had previously compiled. Something that is particularly relevant at the moment. Prices of petrol and diesel have come down, obviously, but are still at an all-time high. A couple of years ago, there was the removal of the essential car user allowance from staff, so it makes the mileage rate that is paid to staff particularly relevant. The one thing we would keep asking the council to do is to be pushing the government on reviewing the HMRC rate, which I think there's sort of wide acknowledgement that it's outdated and hasn't been reviewed for a good many number of years. There's a note in John's paper that the NHS Agenda for Change contracts pay a significantly higher mileage rates, and I believe the Scottish and Welsh governments have both reviewed their use of mileage rates. So that's something that we are focused on and definitely will be focusing on and are still getting feedback on from staff.
Well, let's start with taking action immediately then, Louise. We'll put a letter to the Treasury regarding the HMRC rates on mileage. Let's kick that off now, because there's no reason why not to do that at all. And we'll see what we get back, and we'll share that with the union, assuming that they reply at all. We've not had the best of luck with getting replies out of government ministers or ministries of late. I think I had sort of two reasons for requesting this come onto the agenda. One of them is so that councillors can see some of this information, which there have been a number of somewhat less than helpful comments from certain members in some meetings of late. And so my other request, Louise, is that when you send out the metrics under item 6, that you also send out this to all members of Waverley Borough Council, so they can actually get an idea of what our own staff are having to face in terms of even getting to this building and the cost of doing that. Patrick, in terms of things like staff working from home and flexible working, do the union collect any feedback on how that's going and how that's working?
We don't. I think what we have had back anecdotally is that for staff, it obviously depends on the role and where you live, but actually having the ability to come into the office is important for staff. I don't think that's been a problem to date. I'm not aware of any points that the offices have been at capacity, but as long as there is that ability to come into the office, you factor into that as well the cold snap that we've recently been experiencing. Actually, for some staff, it's not affordable to heat their homes, and actually coming into an office that will be heated anyway is a massive benefit. I think there was calculation done that if you spent less than £30 a week on commuting, for most people it actually was more cost effective for them to come into the office than it was for them to heat their own homes. But at this point in time, there hasn't been a big issue between working from the office or from home.
I spent so much time in my office before Christmas for that reason. I felt I nearly needed to declare it. It was for that reason. But yeah, I mean, is this a sort of thing the union is going to ask on formally, or John, is it something that we are asking staff more formally about at any point?
Well, we have looked at it as a sort of from a slightly different angle, because we're looking at reviewing the agile working approach and looking at that from a sort of combined approach for Guildford and Waverley. So we've had some initial discussions with the climate change officer at Guildford. He's been having a look at sort of cost benefit really from a carbon neutral effect of people travelling into work or not. He has managed to identify some information around surveys that have done primarily through COVID in America, which indicated that sort of currently, if somebody is to be home working the whole of the time, that is a sort of a more carbon friendly approach to working. Rather than actually coming in. At the moment, hybrid working isn't particularly, because you're almost having sort of the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds, should I say, in terms of obviously fuel one way, but also the heating your home. And obviously that does vary at different seasons of the year. There isn't a huge amount in the UK that he was able to identify for us on that. I think that's something that is going to develop over time in terms of more information that's there. And we can certainly go out and sort of get additional data on that from staff if you'd be interested in seeing that.
Firstly, yes, it would be. And secondly, it's more of an open question for Patrick and the union more widely. I've been very conscious over the last 4 years that the primary engagement between the union and members is the pay negotiation round every year. And that is usually 4 members, myself, deputy leader, and 2 other members. At the moment, it's Ruth. And who is the 4th one? Peter and Ruth. Who is the 4th one meant to be? I can't remember. So we've only had 3 of us, I think, for the whole time. But it's meant to be 4 anyway. But that, as far as I can remember, that's the only engagement that we actually have with the unions. And I think my open question to you, not for now, but for whenever, is are there any other ways that you think the union and members should engage more regularly about staff views? Because in my regular job, I'm used to a much more active engagement with the unions. And to me, it seems like an area where we just don't have any kind of regular discussions or relationship. It is actually done, it seems, through the medium of other council officers, which I'm sure there might be policy or other reasons why that's the case. And I'm kind of looking at Robin, if you have a comment on that one, but I would like a different type of dialogue with the union over the course of the next few years if I'm still around.
I'm certainly interested in Patrick's view from Unison point of view. I mean, from my perspective, those ongoing mechanisms where we have, the head of paid service, myself and John, meeting with union members on a regular basis at the Joint Consultative Committee to talk through those things, they're helpful from my perspective. But actually, in terms of engagement with members, the Joint Negotiating Committee doesn't have to be only looking at things on an annual pay negotiations basis. There is the flexibility for them to do more if both sides of the Joint Negotiating Committee were interested in and wanted to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I agree with everything Robin just said there. I suppose the only thing I would add is I don't think we've ever felt restricted. I think if there was ever a situation that arose and we felt like we needed to commence some sort of dialogue, I don't feel like we've ever been in a situation where that has been blocked or not presented as an option. The JNC for us is fine at the moment. We were quite happy with that being the only formal engagement, but but no, it's
seriously, it's more I wanted to ask the question, if there isn't any need to do that or any reason to do that, absolutely fine. That's all good.
No, I can't think of any imminent reason why we would need to, but it's nice to know that it is always an option and a possibility if the occasion arose.
And good to know from the JNC perspective, it does need to, if it did ever need to do something else other than pay negotiations, it actually can do that and can be flexible. So Robin, we could, in theory, if an issue did come up or somebody, one side or the other, wanted to raise an issue, that could just be scheduled like any other committee. Yeah.
Yeah, from memory, a meeting can be scheduled at any point if the 2 sides agree to schedule it, so no problem.
Okay, any questions from anybody else in the room or on the Zoom? No, I'm not seeing any, in which case, thank you, John, thank you, Patrick. In terms of future work programme, Louise, anything you wanted to add at this point? Otherwise, I'll do the rounds again.
Just to sort of get a feel, perhaps for the length of this working group, whether you want to sort of take it on forward through the rest of the year, whether you want to have an interim report to your committee formally.
Right, so we are at a bit of a hard deadline in the fact that there are elections in, well, we go into pre-election period in what seems like a very short space of time. So I think we will have to have some kind of interim conclusive report. Because obviously any new administration of the council is going to have to decide whether this is a priority still or not. Speaking for myself, if I'm still around doing any of this, it will remain a priority until the metrics say otherwise, because it needs to be based on evidence whether this exists and nothing else. So if the metrics that we're looking at, if you can set a deadline for the town and parish councillors and others to come back to you, if we set a periodicity to review those metrics, we can start, I think, collectively coming to a view as to when we don't feel this committee is necessary anymore based on what the data is saying. But for now, if we can do an interim report for, say, I don't know, March or something like that. The new administration post May the 4th will have to make a call as to what they want to do. I can't bind them. So, okay. Any other comments as to things we might want to do in the interim before March? Probably got enough to get on with for the moment, haranguing ministers and such.
Just
Yeah,
sorry, just something to be mindful of. You've got schemes like the energy schemes that currently, although it's not before March, the current scheme does end in April. And obviously we're all hoping for warmer climates come April, so we shouldn't be so reliant on our heating, but things like that will have a knock-on impact as well.
And we also shouldn't be reliant on the temperature going down to not put people into poverty or not, and making sure we've got things in place just in case. As you say, though, many of them are the end of April. I have no doubt that if some version of this administration exists, it will be taken up in some regard in the same manner, but I obviously can't preclude that. So for the moment, I think that's all of it for now, unless there's any other comments anybody wants to make before I close it down. In which case, no, thank you very much, everybody.